Good day, and welcome to A Place Called Through. I'm your host, Patricia Wade Goings, and we're broadcasting live from WYTV7, Christian Broadcasters Network. It is our mission to share a message of hope, a hope to empower, encourage, and inspire others. And we do so globally, reaching 1.5 million people. We ask that you help us continue in this mission of hope. Our mission, again, is to empower people, and it's done through your charitable giving. So we ask you today, won't you please consider making a donation to help us continue with our mission? And we thank you in advance for doing so. Today, we have as our guest Miss Renee Salway, who is going to share her story of turbulence, the story of challenges throughout her childhood, the being separated from her family, reaching places of unknown and insecurity. Again, our guest today is Miss Renee Salway, and she is here to share her story of Mission of Hope. And we welcome you to A Place Called Through, Miss Renee Salway. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here today and share this incredible Cinderella story, if you will. There's so many parallels that it's just amazing how God can take a broken, bruised, and used and abused child and create something lovely and beautiful out of it.
And that he will do, and he has done so. And we're thankful to God for using you, even though it was, went through so much horrific, life challenging situations you've gone through. So why don't you take us to early childhood, your family life? What was your early childhood life with your parents and going to school and your siblings?
So, well, to say that it was dysfunctional is not a large enough word. I think my family created that word. I usually have a diagram of stick figures because it helps people see the connection. So there was my father and my mother. They had 5 children of their own. They went through a divorce, and this was back in the late 50s, which was not very common or acceptable or talked about. And my biological mother suffered from schizophrenic, manic depressant, bipolar. So she was not a very mentally or emotionally healthy woman at the time. And my father was not a very kind husband either. He was very abusive to her. I have records of them being so violent with each other, they put each other in the hospital. I mean, it's pretty dramatic. So they ended up with the marriage fragmenting, and my father married his best friend's wife, which was very strange because she had 2 children of her own. And her husband died unexpectedly from some heart condition. So my father took all of us children at first. So there were 7 kids, and the oldest one was 7. So that's a lot of children.
Yes.
So
Large family.
oh, holy cow. So what they did is they went back to court, and my stepmother just said, there's no way I can handle all these children. So my oldest sister went into foster care. My second oldest sister went to another foster family. My older brother went into foster care. My father kept my brother and and I think mostly because we were the youngest. We were 3 and 1, and his new wife's children were 5 and 6. So there was an age gap. And what's really interesting is because they loved each other so much, snicker, 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 they decided to have 3 more kids. I'm like, what are you doing? You didn't like the ones you had. So it was very, his kids, her kids, their kids. It was very tumultuous. There was a lot of, I was thinking over today what to share, because there's so many stories that I have. But the fact of feeling so unloved and so unwanted, my stepmother from a very, very early age, I mean, she just told me point blank, we don't want you. Your father doesn't know if he's your father. I wish you were never born. My father was an alcoholic. So of course, whatever uh, troubles that brought in the family, I was the scapegoat. Whatever happened, it was my fault. If they didn't have money, if he drank too much, if the car didn't start, for crying out loud, if her children didn't get good grades, somehow it was my fault. There was nothing that could happen in that household that wasn't my responsibility in some way, shape, or form. So, it's a story of survival. Patricia. I mean, it was getting up every day thinking two things. One, I'm happy I'm alive. And then on the other hand, thinking, why? What is the point? Just to be the scapegoat and punching bag? What was the purpose?
So at this point, and I assume very early in your life, you're still struggling here because again, you're trying to figure out what is this? Why? Yeah, and there were no explanations. You were just going through this cycle that was so hurtful to you. I mean, losing one parent this way, gaining another one, and you're separated from family that you've known all your life, your other sisters and brothers. And I'm sure, that had to been really horrific for you because here you are, a little child going through the not being wanted, the dysfunctional family, and you're still trying to fight for survival here. So now you're in even a more dysfunctional situation here. And it's becoming more painful to you because now you're realizing, okay, I'm not really wanted. So talk to us about that feeling for a little bit. How did it feel to know that actually the parent whom you look to, the person that you thought that you could turn to, the person that was the parents, to you, now saying, we don't have room for you. We don't want you.
Well, the feelings are quite jumbled, to be honest. This all happened when I was about 3.5. So my older siblings actually had more memories of me than me of them. And when you're that young, really all you do is function on feelings. You can't process it because it doesn't make sense in that child mind. And I just remember this overwhelming feeling of sadness. And now they've said, children can function and have problems with depression, which I'm sure I did. I just didn't know it at the time. It was just this heaviness day in and day out, getting up, doing the chores that I had to do around the house, trying to make it through school, trying to function when I came back home from school. Just an overwhelming sadness and heaviness is about the only way I can explain it. And then, of course, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Now, what was, okay, because you did mention that one of your brothers was still there with you. So what kind of relationship and support did you have from your brother that was still with you?
Well, actually, I was his support. There was an event that happened when I was about 8 and he was 6. He's about 2.5 years younger than me. And my stepmother called me into her bedroom, which was kind of creepy. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, you didn't just go in your parents' room. I mean, it was like sacred, hallowed ground. So when we were called into her room, it was, my heart's racing, my palms are sweating, like, what in the world is going on? And she told my younger brother to put his hand in mine. And she said to me, you are now his mother. Whatever he does is your responsibility. He gets in trouble, you get in trouble. When he's supposed to get up, you make sure he gets up. He does his schoolwork. So I became a mother at 8 years old.
Amazing.
And, I loved my brother and I do love my brother. We're not very close now because of other circumstances, but growing up, I mean, I had those mixed feelings, because if he didn't obey, I was going to get in trouble, like physical harm. And on the other hand, he's my brother. So it was a real challenge to try to have a brother-sister relationship when I was forced into that role of mother.
So your relationship continued for a while with your brother, even though you were forced into this situation to kind of be his guardian. And even if he did something wrong, you were still getting blamed for it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And part of me, it was almost like a love-hate relationship because when he was disobedient, those angry feelings came up because I got myself physically abused just like him, actually worse, because why wasn't I watching him? And then on the other hand, he's my brother, so I try to protect him. So I went through this period where I learned my brother didn't know how to keep his mouth shut. He just mouth off at school. And so he'd get notes home. And of course, guess who signed him? I did. And I did that for years. I learned how to forge her name until there was a parent teacher conference. And then, well, the truth came out.
But you were doing what you thought was right and what you were actually told to do.
Absolutely.
You were actually placed in a situation. So you naturally just felt that, okay, if I'm going to be his guardian, well, this is what the guardian does. But then came a time where now you're maturing, you're developing, you're getting into your own personality now. You're kind of understanding some of what has happened to you a little bit better. But this love-hate relationship with your mom and your dad still continues with you. So your brother and you still have this relationship going on. Tell us what happens now that, okay, you're a little bit older, time has passed, your family is still dysfunctional, and you mentioned about the physical abuse. So there was abuse in your family, obviously.
Oh, it started when I was 2, with my father physically abusing me and the rest of the kids. There was sexual molestation when I was very young. And then again, when I was a teenager, if you want to call it that, from my father, from my stepbrother. I was raped at knife point when I was 15 by some stranger. And the daily beatings. I mean, it gets to a point where you almost don't feel anything. You kind of shut down, because if I were to go into detail about the physical abuse, especially, people would be wincing. And I wince at it now because it's so many years ago. But at the time, it was just the course of my life. It was just put up and shut up. But on the other hand, I like to say, and in my memoirs that I'm writing, there were so many godly interruptions. And at the time, I didn't quite understand them, but they were amazing. And one of the ones that I like to share, there's 2. There's the first one that I like to share, because I have a weird sense of humor. I tell you what, going through what I've gone through, you got to work it all out, baby. So when I was in 3rd grade, I was thinking, what is the purpose of my life? I was so depressed and despondent. I thought, I'm just going to end it. This is stupid. What is the reason for being? So I decided in my little mind, I'm going to go home, get my bicycle out of the shed, and I'm just going to ride into the middle of traffic and be done with it, And of course, in my mind, I thought, oh, they'd be weeping and crying. You know how your little childlike mind works. So I got my bicycle after school and I drove out, and I grew up outside Chicago. So when I say busy streets, I'm talking busy streets. I rode my bike into 4 of the busiest intersections I could find with my eyes closed. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do it and just go right into the middle of the street. Nobody hit me. Nobody. I was like, how is this possible? I get home. Absolutely. And I got home and I didn't know what to think. I was so angry. I'm like, okay, how did I fail at this? Not knowing, of course, that God had a larger plan in my life. There was a reason for these people honking their horns and yelling at me to get out of the street. One really, I should have ended up injured, at least in some way, shape, or form. So there's many incidences of that throughout my life as well that I see clearer now, even if at the time I didn't understand it.
That is something. Well, Miss Salway, we're going to take a minute and pause for a commercial break, and then we'll come back to A Place Called Through, and we'll continue with your story, Renewed to Your Father. Our listeners and our viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Swing Into Their Dreams Foundation presents the Golf Tournament of the Year, raising scholarships for aspiring National Golf Club in Milton, Georgia. The inaugural HBCU Swing Into Their Dreams Charity Golf Tournament. Registration and gourmet continental breakfast begins at 8 a.m. and shotgun at 10 a.m. Award reception follows. Come enjoy a day of jazz, mimosa, cigars, cash bar, silent auction, and more. For more information, contact 770-686-71 their dreams. Don't miss it.
And welcome back to A Place Called Through, broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. Today, you're hearing the story of being abused, neglected at an early age. Miss Renee Salway went through so much turbulence in her childhood life, not being wanted by her parents, and now having to move on into foster care, being separated from her siblings, the only family that she's ever known. And at a very early age, she wanted to end her own life because of so much hurt and the pain, and of course, the shame that her life had already endured. So we're going to continue with Miss Salway today and talk about renewing her life to the Father. And just, to point it out, her name, Renee, actually means renew to your Father. Miss Alway, welcome back to A Place Called Through. As you were just stating, at an early age, you actually got on your bicycle because you were so hurt by all of this turbulence in your life. You didn't understand the many challenges now that you were going through. But then by the divine intervention, your life was spared as you rode out into lanes of traffic on your bicycle. There was intervention. There is intervention in your life. So bring us now. Your family is all separated. You're ready to come out of school, and yet you're still facing more turbulence. Where are we in your life at this point now?
Well, that's a good question. There's a lot to unpack here. So that first incident of trying to commit suicide was in third grade. So let's move forward several years to a couple of other things I want to share of how God intervened, and then move on to how I actually came to have this relationship with him. There was a year in junior high where my stepmother bought us a pass to the local pool. I think a lot of it was just to keep us out of the house. If she could keep us gone from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m, that's exactly what she did. So, we were hungry all the time. She would send us out on these 12-hour days with no food, no money, nothing. So we learned very quickly to find change in the parking lot of the local grocery store. And we'd go and buy candy bars or whatever. And then, amazing, we found out about the instigating of sell-by dates or expiration dates on food. I know I'm going to sound like I'm 110, but when I was small, that was not common. It happened when I was about in junior high. So the grocery store that we cut through quite frequently the backside of, I started noticing them throwing out food, boxes of cereal, boxes of crackers. And we were like, what in the world? We thought we were in heaven. So we learned how to dumpster dive before it was a fad. We did it out of necessity. And one particular day we went in there and there were boxes of cereal. Now there's two cereals, and I've shared this story before, that I never eat anymore. One is Captain Crunch and one is Raisin Bran. So we found a box of Raisin Bran, and I don't even remember the other box that my brother had. I ate the whole thing in like 3 hours without milk. Not the smartest thing to do. Went home, was sick as a dog for 2 days, and my stepmother's, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know. And then another incident, I got the, I think my brother had cornflakes, and I had a box of Captain Crunch. Again, not very smart. Ate the whole box without milk. I couldn't talk for like 3 days. The roof of my mouth was so tore up. But I'm sharing this to say, God knew we were hungry. Who knew this was going to be the way? Because we went there on a regular basis that whole summer. And I have to admit, that's probably one of the summers growing up that I never really was hungry. Nobody else knew about it except myself and my brother. And so then again in 8th grade, I decided I'd had enough again. And I had a friend at the time who was going through a very challenging time at home as well. And we decided we were going to commit suicide together. And, to be honest, I don't think that I really wanted to die. I just wanted all the pain to stop. And I didn't know what my options were. So we, being 8th graders, decided we were going to try to cut our wrist with scissors. Yeah, that didn't work real well. That was too much pain. So I said to her, well, why don't you try to get some razors from your dad's shaving kit? She comes back the next day and she's like, you're not going to believe this, Renee. He usually is out of the house by like 7 a.m, all of this. He hung around, so she couldn't even bring the razors to school. And we were like, okay, obviously this isn't going well. Maybe this is something we should not do. So again, I really believe God stepped in and prevented that from happening, because we had made a pact. We had written notes. We were going to do this together. We were going to make this happen. and it just didn't. And like I said, I don't think that I really wanted my life to end, but I wasn't living either.
That was
So
because you were so young and with so much turbulence going on, and you're just miserable, because you're
right.
still finding out some other things. And I noticed in our pre-interview, you said about your stepmother lied actually about your family tree.
Hmm.
There were
Hmm.
lies, and she told you that you were manic depressive, and I believe you told me that she said also something about schizophrenic. But you're finding out now, okay, you're a little bit older here, and you're able to understand and process some of this. So the hurt still remained that you wanted to end it all, because
Sure.
all the way up to age, what, 18, you were still having all of these issues, but you realized within that there was something unique still going on. Something was being birthed inside of you that just was not going away, as was this hurt and this pain. Yet there was something still greater inside of you that had to come out, that was still being birthed. And now you're at a point where, okay, I've been through this storm. Now I'm going to go over here where the wave is a little bit higher and it's a little bit stronger, and it's pushing some of these things out of the way. And so after completing school, you were actually told prior to completing school that you needed to be out of the house by a certain age.
Yeah.
And so you went on into foster care. And in foster care, yes, you were still having some of those same issues, but bring us to that point where there was a
Okay.
revelation that happened in your life that now has turned all of that hurt and pain into a uniqueness. And we have roughly about 10 more minutes to go. So I really want to fast forward you into that place
Sure.
where you now have gone through.
So I call it the Great Countdown. When I was about 12, I was working outside in the heat with no water, and I fainted. And of course, my stepmother freaked out a little bit and was trying to help me. And I realized if I could just teach myself to faint on demand, maybe I would get out of some of this stuff. And I did. I figured it out. And I call it the Great Countdown because there was a pivotal moment in my mind and my heart that I thought, okay, if I can make 6 more years, I'm going to make it. If I can just live through the next 6 years. So I started doing a countdown. 6 years to go, 5.5 years to go, 5 years to go, just counting down. So, and yes, my stepmother had told me since kindergarten when I was 18, I had to move out. She didn't want me. I didn't have a job. I started paying rent in 8th grade. I didn't have a driver's license. So moving through high school, I get to the fall of my senior year, and my birthday's in the middle of the year, by the way. So I went to my counselor and I said, look, this is what's happening. I'm going to end up on the streets. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. So he connected me with a place called The Bridge that, for all practicality, it is basically foster care for older teens. Usually it's for troubled teens. I didn't feel I was the trouble. I felt my family was the trouble. So I met with, I'll just call her Mom Smith. She has since passed, but just for privacy. And we sat down and we talked, and we came to an agreement that I would move in with them on my birthday. And so from September to December, to say that my anxiety was off the charts is, I don't even know how to explain how anxious I was. So not knowing who my father was, not really knowing my birthday, not knowing what was going to happen to me. So the night before my birthday, I just laid there and I just sobbed. I cried out to God in a very raw and real way. I didn't really have any religious upbringing. We weren't church going folks. And I just said, God, if you're real, I will do whatever you want me to do. I just can't be put in a family like this. Because I had heard those horror stories that sometimes the foster families aren't any better than what you're leaving. And I just laid there and I was just sobbing and repenting, even though I didn't know that was the word for it. And I was sitting Indian style on the floor with my head down and just sobbing. There was water piling up on the tile. And in the middle of that, it felt as if someone took an electric blanket and just wrapped it around me. And I could feel the weight and the heat. And I just became really, really calm. And I looked at the clock, it was over to my left, and it said 1:05 a.m. And that just kind of stuck in my mind. And I just kept taking deep breaths and calmly quieted myself to finally go to sleep. So the next day was my 18th birthday. It's the first week in December. So I went to school, came back, and got my little suitcase. My foster family picked me up. And I remember them looking at me and looking at that suitcase. And they both said, "Is that it?" I was like, "Yeah." So we went to their home into another town. And I remember walking in the door and Mom Smith came up to give me a hug to welcome me. And I just stood there like a statue. I didn't even know what to do. I had never been hugged in my life. And I thought, here I am, I'm 18 years old, and I don't know what to do with myself. So we had dinner that night, which was unusual for me to be in a family situation like that. And we were talking, and I said to her, I said, I had this really unique experience last night. And she said, "Well, tell me about it." So I told her what I just told you. And she just starts crying and sobbing. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I upset her. Is she going to be angry? What's going on?" I didn't realize they were tears of joy. And it still chokes me up. And she says, "Renee, I believe you had an encounter with Jesus last night." And I just kind of looked at her and I said, "Well, I believe something happened." So we went through the plan of salvation and all of that. And I knew she was right. I knew that's exactly what happened. So we were going to a Lutheran church. We were talking about my name earlier. And back then in the 80s, it was the thing to find out the meaning of your name. And I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. And Renee does literally mean born anew. And Arlene, my middle name, means devoted to her father. And in my heart, I believe it's devoted to my heavenly Father.
Awesome. And yes, there was divine intervention going on there. God was redeeming you, but the thing was that you stayed strong, even though you went through so much hurt and so much pain, the shame, the humiliation, the separation, the unbearable situations, even situations that you were not able to share with anybody because you didn't think that they would even believe it, more or less want to hear it. So you truly have gotten to a point of redemption because God did the significant thing to you. He let you know that he was still with you, even though you were hurting. We need to bring this to a close. And I'm sorry that we have run out of time, but we want you to know that we feel your hurt and your pain, and we'd like you to come back, and maybe share some more with us at another time. But for our listeners and our viewers, if you have any works, any books or literature that you're working on, please tell them how we can reach out to you to talk to you some more about your story.
Sure, thank you. So I am working on my memoir. It is going to be called The Great Countdown, I hope to have that finished by the end of 2021 and out on the shelf. I have a website. It's called hopetoovercometoday.com, or you can reach me at reneesalway.com. Same with my Facebook page, LinkedIn, they're all connected. So if you type in Hope to Overcome Today or Renee Salway, you'll be able to connect with me. And I have some Bible studies on there. I have some videos. I have a YouTube channel. So there's all kinds of ways, thank you, social media, to connect. And I would be happy to share my story or give them some tips if they have gone through something similar on how to move through that into a place of health and well-being.
You've heard it here live. A Place Called Through, broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. Today, our guest has been Miss Renee Salway, who has shared her story of grief and hurt and shame as a child, but now renewed to the Father. And we thank you for being our guest. I am the host, Patricia Wade Goings. And again, we're broadcasting from A Place Called Through at WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. If you'd like to be my guest and share your story and your testimony, please contact me in area code of 843-608-9744. By email, you can reach me at pgoingswp@gmail.com. And also you can follow me on Facebook at A Place Called Through at Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. Also, don't forget, you can buy my book. I am the author of Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. And that book is now available at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. Again, I thank you for being my guests and our listeners today. Again, those charitable donations help it make the difference for us today. Thank you so much for being our guest, Ms. Salway. We look forward to talking to you again on A Place Called Through.